Since the dawn of civilization, spies of every nation and culture have worked to infiltrate their adversaries and glean the information that will give their side the advantage. The stakes are sky high, the strategies varied and imaginative, and the ultimate sign of success is that no one ever even knew you were there. In each episode, we will explore the moral and ethical gray zones of espionage, where treachery and betrayal go hand in hand with cunning and courage. This is the Spycraft 101 podcast. Welcome to your clandestine classroom. This is episode number 97 of the Spycraft 101 podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Olga Sheymov. Olga has worked in high technology, on arts projects, and as a television producer. Her TV credits include the long-running series Russia Today, produced from 1997 until 2015, and Your Source TV, among other projects. But long before she began her media career, Olga and her husband Victor Sheymov defected to the U.S. and were smuggled out of the Soviet Union and into the Carpathian Mountains by a team from the Central Intelligence Agency in 1979. Victor was a high-ranking member of the KGB and proved to be an incredibly valuable source of information for the U.S. government for years to come, although their relationship with the CIA and FBI encountered many problems, to say the least. I invited Olga onto the podcast to discuss her upbringing in the USSR, her dramatic escape, and what it's like to build a new life as part of a defector resettlement program. But before we dive into this story, I want to say a big thank you to everyone listening who's also supporting me on Patreon, including Christian W. and Frank W. Your monthly contributions there help me keep this podcast going week in and week out. As a way of thanking my patrons, I offer a lot of great freebies and promotions, including free and discounted books and products from the Spycraft 101 store. Patrons also get exclusive access to long-form articles of mine that aren't available anywhere else. If you haven't signed up for my Patreon yet, but you want to, just click the link in the show notes on whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. Olga, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. So your friend Alexandra Costa, my previous guest from episode 35 of the podcast, put us in touch, and I'm very happy it's worked out like this. So when and how did you get to know Alexandra?
We first saw Alex Costa on TV. She was discussing Yurchenko case. And then when we moved to Washington, D.C. in 90s, Victor met her as they both going to different TV stations to talk about the fall of the Soviet Union. We became friends later. We went to many parties, and she started Russia Today Gourmet, which brought a lot of good food to Washington area after after the fall of the Iron Curtain.
Okay, that's terrific. Yeah, she seems like a great person to know, and she's been a great help to me as well, putting us together. So I really appreciate that. So I'd like to go back to the beginning of your story, if we can. Can you just tell me what it was like for you growing up in the USSR as a young girl?
Yes, I would love to. First of all, during my year in college in Russia, I was approached by someone who asked if I'm prepared to sacrifice for my country with complete devotion to career, with no possibility of a family life. That was my first encounter with the KGB. I said no because I didn't feel like it was for me. I was born in St. Petersburg under the iron fist of communism. And my both parents graduated from architectural college in St. Petersburg and were stationed at the remote naval base in the Arctic Circle on the White Sea near Murmansk. It was freezingly cold there, powerful wind and trees, and the trees were very, very short, like few feet, because of frozen land. So our life was pretty tough. It was a communal apartment, scarce food. But one of my memories was that my father brought a yellow canary to the communal bathroom to the dismay of our neighbors. But I later realized that it was his hope to have a brighter future. And when he retired, he moved to the area where these yellow canaries were flying freely. My first lesson at the age of 5 was when I was playing in the snow. It was a strong wind, which threw me into the ravine. Like I was alone on the snow in a big, scary place. Nobody looked for me. The power lines were ripped off and it was dark. And I was climbing in the deep snow to find my way. And that really taught me that in life, you have to rely only on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised by grandparents from the age 7 in Samara, schooled in classical ballet piano, often performed and danced at secret factories during lunch breaks, for the military, also in the evenings and during the day. And my interesting experience was when I was a student in college. I was studying engineering. I was sent to collective farm to pick up potatoes in the field. There were 300 girls sleeping on mattresses in the gym with limited access to bathroom and shower. We were read newspaper Pravda before work, poorly fed, and had to fulfill potato quota every day.
Oh my
But
gosh.
it was a good time still, because at night we will sit around the fire in the woods, singing songs, sharing stories. So I think it was a very good lesson to learn to work as a team, adjusting to tough environment and survive. So I received degree in engineering and worked at the Central Institute for Information and Patent Research in Moscow later.
Wow. So is that where you were when you met Victor, or did that come later?
Yes. The summer after I graduated, I was assigned to Canadian delegation for Olympic student games. KGB pushed me in the middle of a espionage game between Canadian spy and the KGB operation officers. I resisted, but it was a dangerous situation. So I met Victor, and this charming and resourceful young man helped me to get out of this situation. But of course, I had no idea what a meticulous plan he had to meet me in American dry cleaners in Moscow until we came to this country.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. So you didn't know anything about his career initially when you first met him?
No, I had no idea. He told me he was a scientist. And actually was true, because he worked at the Space Research Institute before, but I think he worked specifically for scientific research for guidance system to use in the Soviet Star Wars missile defense program.
Hmm.
So I didn't know, I had no idea. And obviously, as most people during communism and after Stalin time were afraid of people who worked in KGB, and he was not allowed even to tell me in the beginning.
Of course, that makes sense. And did he reveal very much of it prior to his decision to defect, or did that come as a surprise very, very late for you?
No, he had to tell me when he really were dating and he felt like he's serious. He wanted to make sure that I will not say no to marry him because of that. So he had to tell me this. But also, Victor told me, I promise you one thing when he asked me to marry, you will never be bored. And I think he kept this promise for years. He played chess, raced cars, knew Russian history and literature. He can repair anything. He was very popular in garage repairing cars. And he also was a fun person in the company, telling all these funny stories. He also was a sprinter, and his 100-meter dash was not, his record stayed for 20 years at the Bauman Technical University.
Wow, my gosh, he was a very talented guy all around.
Yes, I was very lucky to meet him.
That's wonderful. So later on in his career, you said he was a scientist with the space agency initially, but what did he work on once he was recruited by the KGB? What was his duties with them?
Yes, he worked first at the cypher communications. He was different in deciphering telegrams, and then he became head of security for cypher communications worldwide. He was responsible for coordination of all aspects of KGB cypher communication security with the outposts abroad.
My gosh, that's an incredibly important position. Then managing
It
all those
is,
communications.
yes, it is very stressful because sometimes he worked 24-hour shifts and you cannot make any mistakes. It is, it is very, very stressful work, responsible work. And I think his education and analytical mind helped him to stay on the top of it.
It must have. I have to imagine that the skills that he had were incredibly rare in the KGB at that time with this new technology that was being developed and used.
Yes, and everybody was very curious because we lived in an apartment where a lot of mostly KGB people were living and were friends with many people, but people really would like to know what was he doing and used every spy trick to learn. So I had to learn fast not to say anything, except the fact that I didn't know much. He didn't want to tell me because that will jeopardize my security too.
Sure, of course, that makes perfect sense. So, because he had this very, very high position with the KGB, did that lead to a better quality of life for your family at the time?
Yes, we were well off in a way that we had a two-bedroom apartment. It was small, but for Soviet standards, it was good. We also had, free medical and a car. So it was not, it was a good life over there, except that we had the issues we're going to discuss about the communism and a lot of things over there. But Victor was a troubleshooter. He always looked for solutions. And one of the reasons he was in high position and rised quickly through the organization, because he had this combination of analytical mind, vast knowledge, and the ability to work fast. And he also treated people very well. But his bosses, he had very interesting relation with his bosses. He used humor. One of his things, when the boss called him and said, "You have to do this. How did you do this?" Like always, boss never satisfied with work. And then Victor looked at him and say, we have this very interesting manner in the KGB. We first break eggs and then we'll look for the pan. So that was his famous expression. And so he said, no, we have to look more ahead, when we break the eggs. So
I love it.
was,
Yeah. Olga, I watched some of a press conference that he went to, the first one in 1990, when he's in the disguise. I watched some of that, and he had the reporters laughing immediately at this press conference. Even though it's a very serious subject, you can really see his personality kind of shine through right off the bat. So I can totally believe that he was a very unique guy in that position.
yes, he was really, really a special person. Yes, he done a lot of interesting things over there and was promoted because he could deliver, really.
So when you say he could deliver like that, what were some of the successes that he had during his time in that organization?
Well, it was very interesting. He was working on this new system for protection and secure rooms for cypher communication equipment. And some embassies resisted this because it required more space. And so one of his interesting events, and it's so well described in the book, how he went to Warsaw to convince a general and ambassador to give him more space in the embassy to put this secure equipment, an enclosure for secure equipment. I was amazed how it was psychology. And his conversation described in the book, just amazing because just young guy, and he looked much younger, convincing two very important people with connection to the Central Committee just to do what his department wanted was an easy task. And so nobody wanted to do this. So they sent him as a gopher just to hoping that if he fails, it's going to be not on the bosses. But he managed to do this. So that was one of his things. He also helped to install huge computer in this Yasenevo. It's another location for KGB. Before Andropov will come and check it. So that was a very important assignment. And he was ahead of people there learning computers and being comfortable with new electronic systems. But another very interesting event was when Victor went to China. Obviously, when he went to China, he was there almost 7 months. We were not allowed to talk on the phone. Nobody should know where he was. The only thing I got sometimes letters, they were illustrated, obviously. And I also had to see some KGB handler who will give me money because his paycheck was given to the family. And during this time, the officer will walk with me and ask multiple questions. So he has to write a report on my attitude. And they like to ask provocative questions. Do you miss your husband? Yes, I do. Do you want him to come back now? It's been 6 months you haven't seen him. Yes. Do you want to write to our boss that you're not happy? And you have to answer, no, we're serving our Communist Party. Everything is great. So that was very, very unpleasant experience for me. But when Victor was in China, it was one of very big successes because all negotiations with China were failing with Russia for many, many years, and nobody could figure out why. So they were looking for all this equipment. They checked everything, rechecked everything, and they couldn't find how Chinese know everything before negotiations. And then Victor and his team find out that we're using the chimney. And this event is described as audible. There's a very nice clip, you might use it for your podcast, how they did this. But that was very important as this, eavesdropping stopped.
Oh, yeah. I know how in other situations, like in U.S. embassies, those occasions when they found something like that in the past, it really makes a career like that because they're so well placed and so difficult, and they've hampered so many operations and so many projects. So I'm sure that was like a star-making turn for Victor once he discovered that.
Absolutely. And he was very proud of this and his team. He worked very well with people.
Amazing. So it sounds like his career is going wonderfully, but we, of course, know now that he eventually left. He came, with you here to the U.S. So what was it that began to make him consider leaving and defecting?
Well, it was a very gradual process. Because he was in charge of overseeing all communications of the KGB, it put him in a unique position where he realized the disparity between the idea of the communist system and its reality. We would be discussing life around us, start questioning dogma of the communist system. We will be going to the forest, as we knew we couldn't talk in the apartment or anywhere near people. So Victor secretly studied communist theory. It is very interesting that in our Soviet Union communist system, the theory of communism was hidden in the library. And when he goes there, it was every time whoever reads this is recorded, and it was not good for his work. So that was also, this contributed his understanding of the whole system. And of course, there were some personal stories. Like, you probably read in the book, his friend was killed, who also worked with him in the KGB, in cypher communication unit, was killed for expressing his thoughts about communism and how bad it is. So that really made an impression on Victor. And he knew that he cannot talk about this with anybody. But also, Victor was very much aware of the communist mentality. He also was talking, was talking to some people as a party. He was part of the Communist Party, and he saw mentality of totalitarian, I would say, talking about each other, spying on each other. It is mentality of enemies everywhere.
Mhm.
And that was so really, this mentality was one of the things Victor said, even after communism fell down, the mentality stays. And one of my personal stories, which obviously Victor knew, I had an aunt during, it was during Stalin time, and my aunt was a beautiful lady. She was married with 2 children. And the neighbor wanted, her, he liked her, and asked her to sleep with him. She said, no, I love my husband, I'm not interested. He wrote a letter to KGB that she said something bad about Stalin. And
Oh my gosh.
so she was arrested and put in jail for several months. We had to scramble all connections, all money to get her out of there, as she was just women sitting with children, and there was no reason, to believe that it was true. But the worst thing, that her husband left her because she was now tainted. She now had bad record. So he canceled family so he can continue raising up in the party ranks. And that
Oh
was
gosh.
really, many things like this happened in the Soviet Union. And that's what Victor said, the mentality of communism is really horrific. Same thing during Gulag times. Think, Stalin couldn't kill all these 20 million people. It's people who were so indoctrinated, like zombies, killing other people. So communism system is a very, very dangerous thing. And of course, Lenin said that the communists should control people through media and control their minds. So that's something that, written in the history of the communism.
Mhm.
So it was very difficult for Victor and me to make this decision, but we just couldn't continue lying. And I just knew that one time he wouldn't be able to just hold it, seeing all this, seeing everything that happened to people, innocent people. And we had to make this decision, very difficult decision.
So did the two of you discuss it and make the decision together?
Yes, because Victor said that if I said no, he wouldn't go. But I felt like if he stays, he will get in trouble. I just knew his character. And also, he will need somebody to help him during this intelligent operation. We had to work as a team. So yes, we really came up to this together. But of course, he was the one who initiated that.
My gosh. It's hard for me to imagine what that must have been like. So was it a conversation, like a single conversation you decided on one single
No.
night?
We went, actually, there's a wonderful clip on ACX, you can listen, but it was many conversations. And obviously, even when we decided this, it doesn't mean that it is easy to do. It was very difficult to do. It is such a dangerous thing, and especially, a small child on our hands. So that was a process, considering things, going back and forth. It was very difficult decision, especially because we were both on the top of our professions. We were doing well in the society, but we just didn't want to to conform to everything that would be required from us.
Mm-hmm. My gosh, yeah, it was a tough decision to make, but ultimately it seems like it was probably the right one. So what was the first step after you made the decision to leave? Like, how did you begin to make the very first arrangements?
Well, it was like mind-boggling because Victor and I would start looking for places to contact British or Americans or some, and it was just mind-boggling. He eventually figured out that it is better to contact Americans. He tried to drop a letter into the car of the diplomat. It didn't work. Nothing worked. It was like an agony. And then he had this opportunity to go to Poland. That is, I still can't believe how he did it. I think it's just unbelievable what happened there. And the way he calculated every movement, every single word, his disguise, how he escaped from KGB, how he escaped from American embassy, not to be noticed. I think everything was, of course, his work. And I also believe that was some help from above because it was an unbelievable stand.
Must have been one of the most dangerous, riskiest things that he ever did in his life, although I know a lot of other risks came after that. So he successfully made contact with the Americans in Poland. I mean, did they initially trust that he was who he said he was, or did they think that he was perhaps, bait for a trap?
Yes, I think he just had this ability to convince people. He knew the keywords they will ask. He knew what he should say. Somehow they believed him and helped him to get out of the escape from the embassy. And it was also during Halloween, which I've never heard about this holiday before. So his disguise was really very appropriate. But yes, it was extremely dangerous. He said that he will go to the movies inside the embassy with everybody, and then he escaped through the bathroom window and just went onto embassy and returned by the time movie ended, as if he were there. So that was quite a coup, and it was very important timing. I mean, every second counts because after the movie, people will be going, everywhere, and he couldn't just show up climbing through the window.
Oh, certainly.
So that was very dangerous. And I didn't know anything. I had no communications with him. And then he came back on a train. Somehow somebody KGB told me that he will be coming on this train. And I remember I'm going to the train station to meet him. He liked when I meet him. He never liked me to say goodbye to him. And as the train approaches the platform, I see two men in black coats rushing to the place where I'm supposed to meet him. This was the horrifying moment. I was like, my God, this is not a game. This is something this is dangerous. It's real life, spy business. But what happened later, these men were trying to get to Victor because he was already such an important person. And they used that he brought some little parcel for one of them to make friends with him. So you can imagine me standing there on the platform when they talked to him. Yes, I finally realized I'm in a big game.
Oh, yes. I must your heart was pounding.
Absolutely. I mean, I realized that was for real. Yes.
My gosh. So after that initial contact, how long was it before plans were in place and you were able to actually leave?
That was several months. And during this time, Victor also had to go to Yemen. So I was here also alone, very nervous. I had no idea if he's coming back. We had no communications. It was very difficult time. But then we start preparing for the operation. And the operation required a lot of focus, a lot of details, and the plans were very different. And we constantly discussed them, obviously not in our apartment. So it was strange time. I almost felt like I was in some kind of movie, but it was reality.
So the whole time, I guess you feel like you're living this double life. And I'm trying to imagine, like, right when you're getting ready to leave, you have to say goodbye to your friends and to your family, but they don't know that you're saying goodbye to them. I guess they think that they'll be seeing you again the next week or something like that. What was that like?
Boy, that was very, very difficult because you cannot show emotions at all. You just have to somehow get focused, work on these plans and details. And it is very, very strange and sometimes exhausting. And you think maybe you just not being realistic. But I think eventually he had a communication with the CIA. And it was very interesting. He agreed to have a meeting in Moscow, which was very dangerous also,
Mm.
with guy named Misha, who actually we met him. Very good CIA intelligence officer. And obviously before Victor met with him, Victor and I walked streets. We were looking at different places. What if in intelligence, it's always you're thinking, what is going to happen? So it was very stressful, but also kind of exciting. And I really felt like I was part of his team and I could help.
That's wonderful. Yeah, for you, the two of you to be a team is so important in such a challenging situation like this. I'm glad that you felt like you were involved and contributing, and it was the two of you facing that problem. So the meeting with Misha went successfully. Did he tell you all the details of what would be happening then?
Yes, he told me to get prepared. And Victor was a master of thinking ahead of time. So he said, we have to make a lot of steps to protect people when we disappear so people won't be punished. So it was one of very big little steps we have to do. One of these, he has to quarrel with his best friend so the whole Moscow know that they're not friends anymore long before the operation. He also was making steps to mislead future investigation when we disappear. He also was telling me things like do not touch certain things, leave dust here, don't think of taking any valuables or anything. We will just go to summer dacha to visit a friend. So we just take only light set of clothes and nothing else. But there were several scenarios how we escape. And so it was constant work in progress, constant stress. And when Victor met with Misha again, we had to study a lot of documents. And because one of the main thing was not to change your pattern of behavior, we had to lie on the floor at night with flashlight to read the directions. So whoever was watching our apartment knew that thought we are sleeping and everything is the same routine. Everything has to be the same. You cannot show any emotions. You cannot show any change in your schedules, environment, facial expressions. You can show emotions to your family. So that was quite a challenge.
Oh my gosh, it's hard to imagine, but you're changing your whole life without showing one single clue that you're changing your whole life. That must have been so stressful. So, can you tell me what was the plan in the end? How did you make it out of the Soviet Union without being caught on the way?
Well, the plan was there were several plans discussed, but we decided to obviously one was through Finland, but we decided to escape through Carpathian mountain border. It's where Lvov, Mukacheva. It was very close to the Czechoslovakia. Victor used to be there. And so the whole idea was that we will take several trains, get somehow to the border over there, and then the car will be waiting for us. And American intelligence had this very special car designed where Victor and the child could be hidden in the special compartment, and I will be sitting and pretending to be a girlfriend of the driver. So I think it was a very good plan, but everything could go wrong at any moment. The night we disappeared, we had to change clothing several times. We changed trains, and everything has to be very fast. My ballet training and dancing helped me to change my appearances very quickly. Victor was always laughing about this. As he said, people will look at women how they look and remember their clothing, so they probably will remember you versus me. So he always tried to make it more fun, even when we were 2 weeks traveling, didn't eat, didn't really sleep. It was absolutely exhausting experience. But on the border, I remember when we were crossing the border, I remember my heart was beating like crazy, and there were dogs on the border, but everything was planned very well because the couple who worked on this, they drove there several times before, and they knew where the dogs were fed, and they knew exact time how to get through the border. And I think that was a brilliant CIA operation to exfiltrate family with little child, through the really iron border of the Soviet Union during Cold War.
Wow. So you were crossing the border at the exact moments that the dogs were off being fed for just a
Yes,
few minutes at a time there? My gosh.
yes,
Brilliant.
yes, it was. Victor has this famous quote. He said, "We rarely make mistakes on analysis. We usually make them in our assumptions." And so when we were getting ready for this operation, he told me, "Remember, assume nothing. If something goes wrong," so he was like, what if again? So that was unbelievable that we went through the border and were met with, other American CIA team. And I also think that without some help from above, that couldn't have happened, because there's so many things that could have gone wrong, so many things. I'm just so grateful that the way it all happened. And of course, this was the most successful CIA operation in the history of the Cold War. It never happened before, exfiltrating the whole family from the Soviet Union just in front of KGB.
Incredible stuff. So I'm curious, what did you tell your daughter? Like, what did she know about all of this before and during the operation?
Well, she was going to the dacha to see friends. We were just taking trains to go to the train to dacha, which is a lot of people did this in the Soviet Union. And so, the kid was 5 years old traveling, and we also asked her to put some clothing as a boy, so they won't remember, three people with a girl. But then we changed it again. So she was playing just changing clothing game. And I don't think she really realized this, what was going. But the only thing was later when we were flying from Austria to New York. She was her ears hurt in an airplane, and she said, "Your your friend's dacha is too far to travel on weekend."
Oh my goodness, what a kid. What about when you were crossing the border and she had to be hidden in the
In
hiding
a
space in the
special,
wheelchair?
yes, she and Victor were hidden in a special compartment. She was asleep, and it was scary. I have to
I bet.
tell this scariest moment.
Oh
Yes.
gosh, I bet. And I guess, did it feel better for you because you could see everything, or were you still worried that, you might give it away from your fear or anything like that? Would you have rather been asleep in the compartment yourself, you think?
Well, Victor wasn't asleep. I wasn't planning to be asleep, but I really don't know. I was just trusting at this moment the whole operation, and was just accepting whatever was better. I think after all this time getting ready and going through multiple ideas, that how fearful everything, you just stop thinking about this.
Mm,
You just don't allow yourself to think of what if something bad happens. You just focus and totally believe that it's going to be fine, and you just do it.
mm.
That's the way to go.
Okay. Interesting. So did you ever feel any doubt, like thinking we should not be doing this, we should have just stayed? Or was it like we're committed now and we're going to go through with it no matter what?
No, we were totally committed. We were totally committed. And I think in operations like this, you should not allow yourself to be doubtful.
Every day you're under attack, whether you realize it or not. Your digital devices contain your entire life, your finances, your conversations with friends and family, your interests, and even your movements. And all of that is vulnerable to an ever expanding class of criminals, scam artists, hackers, and even governments. You don't want to leave your data security entirely in the hands of your ISP or anyone else for that matter. It's up to you to protect yourself using a multi-layered defense strategy. Silent offers you the protection you need to keep your data and devices secure from wireless threats. Their multi-shield technology blocks cellular signals, GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, EMP, RFID, NFC, and more. Silent's lineup includes everything from signal blocking wallets all the way up to 40 cubic liter Faraday duffel bags. When you're geared up with Silent, you'll be truly disconnected, undetectable, untraceable, and unhackable. And you can now use the discount code Spycraft101 to save 10% off your order from Silent. Find them at slnt.com. That's slnt.com.
We were really committed because Victor wanted to inflict damage to the communist system. We were so much against, the system which killed 20 million people. And we're really, every family in Russia had story, somebody was killed, especially during Stalin times. So this system should be, stopped. And we totally believed. And it was really our belief that we can do something good. Victor can contribute to the fall of communism that really kept us going forward.
Amazing. And you did make it out safely in the end. So that really speaks well to the plan and to your commitment to it and everything. So what were things like once you arrived in the United States? Neither of you had ever visited before, I assume. Is that right?
Yes, we've never been to anywhere because of Victor's position. My daughter and I, we were hostages. We were not allowed to go abroad at all, anywhere, even to Poland or, the countries, friendly countries. So that was total new experience for me. So yes, everything was new and we were overwhelmed.
I'll bet. Can you talk about the culture shock a little bit? I mean, had you seen anything about the U.S. on television or anything like that that you expected to see or that you did not expect to see?
But first impression was just amazing. I think when we were landing in US, I saw a lot of swimming pools, those blue dots. It was so beautiful. The climate warm, we were in Washington area, and the flowers beautiful. Also, colors, like everything in this area is much brighter. I think it's not only because of pollution, but maybe also position of the sun. So everything was amazing, and new. Yes, first impression of America was absolutely great.
That's wonderful to hear. I had never thought about the swimming pools being the first thing that you see. It makes perfect sense to me, but I've seen them so many times myself. I would have never thought about that with new
Yeah.
eyes, I guess.
We didn't
So,
have anything like this in Russia, so
oh my gosh,
then.
I bet. Interesting. So when you landed, what happened? Were you taken to a hotel or something like that? I mean, was it like a frantic activity? Lots of people welcoming you, anything like that?
Well, we were taken to the safe house, and that was a very, very nice house. We were surrounded by very nice people, bodyguards. We were driven through night Washington, showing all these beautiful monuments. So yes, and life in a safe house was very It was very good because first time Victor and I could go in the garden there, and he told me finally about his job. He finally could tell me what he was doing because in Russia he couldn't tell me. So that was one thing. And of course, he started working with people. Everybody was coming there. People were happy. We met people who actually organized this intelligence operation, the exfiltration. We were so grateful to them. Those were just talented, skillful operations officers. So that was a very good time being in the safe house. And we've been there almost a month.
Okay. Did they start with the debriefings almost immediately? Like, was Victor expected to work right off the bat as soon as you arrived?
Yes. There were many people coming. This house had a conference room. So Victor was working with them. Also, it was a lot of just organizing future work and letting us know how basically life is here. So it was a very exciting time, actually.
Okay. And for you and your daughter, what was happening with you? Were there people that were spending time one-on-one with you as well?
Yes, there was a wonderful female officer there. She took us to zoo, and and then she was spending time with our daughter. There were dogs on the property where my daughter played with. So yeah, we've been taken good care of there, and of course we start learning English.
Ah, yes, yeah, of course. Of course, that makes sense. So how do you go from there? I understand how important those first few weeks are, but then you have the rest of your lives ahead of you here in the US. So at what point did you start trying to build a new life, like, find a home to live in and a school and a new career, something like that? How does that work?
Well, after 3 weeks, Victor said that we would like to move out of the safe house. So the people who were handling our affairs rented townhouse, small townhouse, and we moved there. And it was because we felt like we have to start living independently. So Victor worked, we were taking English lessons. Our daughter went to summer camp. I've got driver's license. So all these things, I've also signed up to dancing class. So it was all normal life. We had different identities. On our first Christmas in the United States, we bought a Christmas tree because you cannot get Christmas tree in Moscow easily. You have to either give the guy who sells Christmas tree a bottle of vodka or give some kind of money.
Oh my God.
And it was really the Christmas tree was cars there. So we put the Christmas tree on the top of our car. We bought some skiing equipment and we went to Pocono Mountains, Pennsylvania. I booked some motel. I had no idea it was my first booking. The hotel had a huge hole in the door. It was freezing, but it was so much fun. We skied. We enjoyed being independent, but also we realized that somebody was following us, our protection, and probably these people didn't like our vacations. They probably
Oh,
felt
right.
miserable because it was so cold over there. So
Sure.
that was our good time. And when we came back, we all these people were coming working with Victor, and especially people from NSA. But Victor said we have to somehow buy the house. We really have to figure out how we're going to live next, what's going to happen. So he requested a meeting so we can move somewhere and start living independently, but he will continue working with the different agencies from the CI community.
Hmm. Okay, I see. So you kind of gradually begin to separate from them, but they still had him as like a consultant or something like that for the long term, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that, from reading the book, and the book, for anyone who doesn't know about it already, is called Tower of Secrets and Tower of Secrets 2, which I'll be linking up in the show notes after this. But from the book, there was some friction that developed between Victor and the CIA especially, but also there was some between the CIA and the NSA, I think, and the FBI, and just a lot of things conflict developed in one way or another over time. So can you talk about how things kind of broke out slowly and some of the issues that you ran into?
Yes, we were in Moscow, the meeting between Victor and the CIA officer. People decide things without documents. You just say, I will do this for you, you do this for you. It's keeping word of honor. It's spy business, and that's how it works. So we were promised, since we gave up good jobs and all our belongings, we agreed with the CIA that they will pay us $1 million here and medical insurance. And so Victor said, let's just see if, we have an agreement and how it's going to work. We would like to live independently. So we had a meeting with this gentleman called Monsanto. He was a representative of the CIA, and he brought a paper, our agreement, in which we were supposed to get $30,000 a year, and then medical insurance, and they will pay for our education. But our education in Russia is free, so we didn't put much emphasis on this. However, Victor said, but how does it come to 1 million? And so Mr. Masanta said, but if you live 30 years and if you multiply 30,000 on 30 years, plus we will give you some money down payment for the house, it's going to be 1 million. We had no idea, is it good or bad? We never saw a check. We've never been, we never saw credit card. We didn't know, is it good or bad to have 30,000 a year? And how does it come up to 1 million? So I guess we just signed paper, moved with our lives. But then when we eventually start learning a little bit about life in America, and Victor went to study to get MBA from Emory Business School, he started questioning this approach. We really had to hire a lawyer to ask for the accounting, and we tried to understand, how it works and why they said that they paid us 1 million. So life was in the undercover, living undercover, had its ups and downs. We had CIA psychologists coming and asking me why I'm not depressed. I was learning English and I was asking, what is depressed? So they were shocked. But anyway, it was a very, very tense time. But we both were going to school. Our daughter had good grades in English, and she played also competitive tennis. So we were going about our lives. But there were many other events that happened with the resettlement, which really made us very unhappy. First of all, NSA wanted to work with Victor, but somehow something changed in the CIA, and CIA decided to give us hard time. Victor was asking also CIA to talk to I think it was 3 years after we lived in undercover, he asked them to somehow let know Victor's parents that we're alive. That was a big ordeal. Obviously, CIA didn't want to do this, but Victor was trying to find a way it can be done so it won't hurt American interests and it won't hurt his parents. So that was one big contention point. And of course, the settlement, the money, where we had to fire lawyers and pay lawyers to really try to get our money back. So telling the long story short, it was a lot of stress to get our money from the CIA. And one of the unusual things, when we requested accounting from the resettlement department, they, in our $1 million, they have included $10,000 for bodyguards where when we lived in a safe house, and 41,000 for rental cars. And so that was obviously unfair. We're very grateful that James Woolsey, former director of CIA, finally took this case pro bono and helped us to get money that were promised to us, but it was 18 years later.
Oh my gosh, 18 years. Wow. That was quite an uphill battle then.
Yes, it was. It really was. It was unfortunate, but we also had good time in living in the South. We were welcome to American people. And I have to tell you a few funny stories of our adjustment living in the US. For example, in our neighborhood, there was a garden club, and I was invited for the meeting, but I had no idea what does garden club means in America. So I I took my shovel, I put my boots, and I'm coming there and I start laughing and say, no, in America, garden club, we're just talking about garden. We don't actually garden. It was so funny.
Oh my
And
goodness.
also, we had a dog. We had an amazing big dog. Our neighbors, they were executives, and they had some kind of corporate event next door, and we had a fence. But somehow, our dog really, really liked the smell of the hamburgers. So he dug the hole under the fence and ran there and grabbed the hamburger from that table. We were
Oh
so
no.
we were so horrified. So next day we're coming to them, please forgive us. We didn't mean it. We couldn't control our dog. And they say, oh no, that was the best thing happened at our party. We've been talking about this next day at the water cooler. So it was a lot of excitement.
I'll bet that would be quite a sight to see.
Yes,
So,
so it was a lot of experience, but I was also thinking that resettlement people should help, like defectors or people who come from different countries with cultural difference. For example, in many countries, people when they talk, they don't keep the same distance. Americans like to keep a lot bigger distance between when you cannot kind of get into their space. Other cultures were standing much closer, especially after riding a bus in Moscow filled with, people filled like, herring in a can. So there are a lot of cultural differences which can be really taught to make adjustment in this country easier. And I later did TV shows on Russia Today where we were discussing cultural differences and how to, understand each other better.
okay, I understand. That's terrific. So you mentioned the bodyguards earlier, and that brings up the point of, do you feel like you were ever in any danger of retribution or murder once you arrived in the U.S.? Because I know that Victor's disappearance was very, very high profile back in Moscow, right?
That's correct. But as Victor plan was to make sure that the KGB thinks we are dead. And obviously nobody believed that it can happen. But he made every little detail to put the, people who were searching for us on the wrong path. And also, he also knew psychology that was not good for people who worked with him to accept this. So investigation found that we were killed somewhere because at this time when we disappeared, there was a lot of rivalry between militia, police, and KGB. Few people were killed, and this was very, very stressful time in Moscow, and so that was easy for the investigation to put our disappearance on this. CIA first didn't believe it can happen, but then through their sources they knew that CIA closed the investigation, so that was good. But you never know. There are spies everywhere. There are moles everywhere. So it was dangerous for us. And at one point in our life, we were warned that somebody was looking for us. And that was very, I would say, it was scary, but we have to live with this. It was our choice. We knew what we were doing. So that was price for what we did.
Hmm.
So we always lived under this veil of danger.
I see. I see. Did you ever have any major concerns? Anything happen that you thought, oh my gosh, they might have found us or anything like that?
There was time at one time when me and my daughter disappeared from where we lived in the south because it was a real scare. Somebody was looking for us. But Victor decided to stay because he said he wanted to know more what happened.
Hmm.
And so I was really worried because we were in another country and he was here alone. But that was Victor. He said, I better know. So at one point, he said, maybe it is time for us to go public because since they're already looking for us, it means KGB knows that we're here. And by this time, Ames was discovered. There are some other issues. So for our own protection, Victor felt that going public will help us and it will be politically difficult for the KGB to do something as it was such a high profile case.
Amazing. So I have seen a press conference that he did. That was about 10 years after you arrived. Was it that long before you went public? Were you here a decade almost in secret?
Yes, we lived 10 years undercover, and yes, and it was quite an experience.
I'll bet. So how did things change for you once he went public like that?
I think it was better. It was better. It was some kind of relief. Plus, he was able to contribute. He was writing articles. He was talking on TV. He was consulting. We were in Washington. It was during amazing time when there was a coup in Russia in August 1991, and it was just very interesting time to be involved in all this, excitement and turmoil.
Amazing. So, like you said, he wrote some articles and that sort of thing. Were you yourself interviewed? I mean, did you have to go public yourself or was it mostly him?
No, it was mostly him. I've done NBC. Dateline later made a TV show with us, and then I was part of interview. But mostly it was Victor. He was a very good speaker. He knew subjects very well. He continued working with all these intelligence organizations. So that was very good time. And we also met a lot of interesting people. We were then friends with a lot of people in Intel community. We had parties in our house. So that was time when we were hoping that Russia will be on a better path.
I see. And did that happen? I mean, after 1991, when the government collapsed, did you feel like things would not just be better for you, but better for Russia, better for your family back home, everything?
Yes, obviously, because finally Victor managed to get his parents out of Russia with obviously help of Jamestown Foundation. 20 senators and 47 congressmen signed a letter to Gorbachev. The parents were let go, and CIA helped them to come to this country. So we are very grateful. And then his sister and with husband and 3 children came here. I think it was very important for him to finally have family here. He felt very bad that they went through 10 years of terrible time, not thinking that he is dead, and going through obviously some KGB questioning. So it was very important emotionally for all of us to reunite.
Mm, mm. I'll bet that must have been an incredible time to get the family back together after so much time apart.
Yes, it was very exciting.
So, how about your own career? I know that we talked about how you began working in media. When did you start that? Was it almost immediately or just after you went public?
No, that was 95. I just felt like it was a good time to, to show, to have Russians, American together discussing our common issues. And I named the program Russia Today. I had amazing guests on the program, like James Billington, the librarian of the Congress. We were discussing a new documentary on Russian history. I personally interviewed him. Famous Russian writer was producer of Prisoner of the Mountains. And we also had one show where the ambassador of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania were on the same show with Paul Gabel. So that was very, very exciting time, for Russian and American good relationship. So, yeah.
It's fantastic. There was something I wanted to ask you about since we're talking about 1995 and on. So I know around that time period that Victor had a very close contact in the FBI that he worked with. It was Robert Hansen, who I think a lot of my listeners are familiar with already. So can you talk about your own interactions with Robert Hansen in those days?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I will talk about Hansen, which is not easy to talk about, since he was a friend, very close friend. That was, I really think that was how would you say, one of the very difficult and I would say horrible lessons of the life. So talking about Bob, we met Bob. He came and I think in the South to meet us and was totally convincing us to go to New York. He was mysteriously looking and soft-spoken, tall, pale, his hands like long fingers, his eyes like dark sparkles, and he moved absolutely silently. Once when I was doing research at the State Department, he appeared behind my back and I didn't hear it until I saw a reflection of him looking on my screen. So Bob was a character, but we also were friends with his wife. Bonnie was a charming Catholic wife, a mother of 6 children. We had dinners together, and they were obviously at our Intel community parties at our house. So my daughter did like him. She said there's something spooky about him, but you know what? Victor was working with him, and we just accepted that people just different. That's all. But if you want to look back at Hansen as a person, as a whole, I would say that he has to be studied as a most rare psychiatric cases because his brain has many compartments and he absolutely controlled these compartments. Like he was a very good family man, devoted Catholic. He was going to the church like all the time, especially 5 o'clock in the morning. He helped to get our daughter in the same school with his daughters. And then he gave our home address to the KGB.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. He was reading books to kids at 8 o'clock, like nobody could touch Bob in the evening because he was reading books to kids. But now we know that he, after this reading the books to his children, he had contacts with the KGB at night. He took us to Quantico FBI shooting range, and he wanted me to shoot from big guns, like really big ones. He didn't shoot himself. He never mentioned that he had a huge arsenal of guns, including AK-47 at his home. He was always in control. The only time I saw him in pain when I was driving him to the hospital. He didn't want to take ambulance and he was driving to the hospital with a suitcase. I was driving him from his house to nearby hospital. It was strange, but I didn't pay attention. I just mentioned this to Victor. He thought this is some kind of FBI thing. But another thing which I learned later, which I still can't believe in, is that he had one of his friends watching his sex with his wife in the house at night when 6 kids were sleeping. That really showed how sick he was and how his different parts of the brain were separated.
Yeah, that was
So
shocking to read.
it is shocking, and I still don't. I personally saw how modestly they lived. They didn't spend much money. They lived, in very middle class neighborhood, nothing extravagant. He helped church, he helped this. I really felt that, and Victor has the same opinion. I mean, it's mostly Victor's opinion, that he enjoyed being a puppet master. Like he enjoyed playing game, FBI, KGB, CIA. He was everywhere. And he did all these dark little plays behind the scene. And that was how he get enjoyment out of the, intelligence.
Amazing. So he was a little bit of an odd guy at occasion, but you never suspected what he had been doing until he was finally arrested in I think April of 2001.
Yes, he was. No, I think it was February.
February. Okay.
We saw it on TV. Victor, by then he had this high-tech company, and we were going to work in the morning. We turned on TV, and we were just in shock.
Did you ever find out how much information he gave back to KGB or FSB about you and Victor?
I don't think we knew everything, but I think in the affidavit when he was convicted, there was mentioning that he gave our address, and he gave some information, but I'm not sure how much. But
Okay.
I think it was enough.
Yeah, it's anything that he gave up because of how interested they were in you and how finding out about you was more than enough, I'm afraid. So that was 2001. Did you continue working with the FBI and NSA and them even so many years after Victor defected? Did he continue as a consultant for decades?
Yes, I think he worked until 1998. And then there was a conflict with the CIA resettlement, because finally by this time, James Woolsey was helping us. And then CIA was really upset that we finally requested what was promised.
Mm-hmm.
So they cut off his pension, they cut off his work for NSA. So we had no income, and it was interesting experience. Yes, it just showed that people in resettlement were very vindictive. And I was thinking about this. Because obviously there are good people everywhere, good and bad people. We had a very good person, John Decker, who helped us, who was later, I don't know, killed or suicide. We still don't know what happened. It's described in the book. But I think a lot of these people who worked in resettlement felt like they were not real spies. They wanted to be in operations. Everybody wants to be in operations. Everybody wants to be a real spy. And so there was a resentment to the job, I guess, but that's my opinion. Because nobody really, they just didn't care for helping defectors. And when Victor was asked at one of the press conferences, how did they treat you? The resettlement, he said, like everybody else. But it happened to be, it was even more because we rebelled, because we wanted to get to the bottom of this, because a lot of things they didn't want anybody to know came up because we were fighting back. But it cost us a lot. It really cost us a lot. But for example, in the first agreement, which Victor signed, $1 million, payment, there was a provision which I remember Mr. Monsanto saying, but if Victor gets killed, you will get 150,000 life insurance. Or he didn't say killed, he said when he dies. but they never paid this amount. Even after Victor passed away, they refused to talk to me. So, but what it is, what it is.
Hmm.
I really feel sorry for this department because people just won't come to them as much as the quality people, as much as they could have got, more help. But it's very difficult, to change the culture. And I think it's a culture of control, which has to be changed. Instead of controlling people, they can lead them. Yes, when we come to this country, we make a lot of mistakes. We don't know culture. We don't know how to do things. But you don't control us. You just let us know what is the best way to adjust and be happy in this country. But they didn't do that.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that that was your experience, because it's hard for me to imagine someone more valuable than Victor and yourself. I mean, it must have been incredible, some of the things that they were learning from him in the early days. I know that he described it in the book, but I can only imagine the kind of reports that they were writing up those very first few days, everything that he was able to give them that they wouldn't have gotten any other way. So it's unfortunate that it kind of turned bitter in the end because of some, contractual disagreements, essentially.
Yes, but he still contributed a lot because our relationship with NSA was very good. Those are good people. And basically his profession was to work with NSA.
Mm-hmm.
So he contributed a lot, and we have friends there. So you cannot just judge community just by one part. And of course, there are good operational officers in CIA, like Misha, who met with Victor in Moscow. We became friends later, and he also worked for Invicta. Speaking of Victor, what he was doing later after, he stopped working for the NSA, it was very interesting. One time, one of our friends came and he was complaining about how computer networks are not protected. And Victor said, well, he started thinking, and he said, if I come up with idea, will you get me money so I can develop the product? He said, if you can protect computers, I will get money for you. And Victor started thinking, and he eventually filed for 30 plus patents. And he's an inventor of variable cyber coordinates, method of communications. But nobody gave us money. So when we've got money from the settlement, we put our own money first in the company and called it Invicta Networks. And later we had investors, and we're very grateful for everybody who wanted for this product to work.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So, Olga, what have you been up to in the past few years? What are you doing now?
Well, first of all, I worked on Invicta Invisalign product. I worked with Victor for, many years. And the system was tested by NSA, Japan supercomputer, and it was the only system which could protect US critical infrastructure like power plants, water facilities, communication centers. But we faced a big impediment that we had the demo center, we were presenting the product. One time, Victor called the guy and said, you saw the system, it really protects by dynamic cybersecurity, it really protects our critical infrastructure. Why don't we start implementing this? And the guy said, do you know that everything in this country has to be approved by the government? And for your information, CIA put a note on your file, no contact. So we cannot deal with you. And so that was, payback from the CIA later.
Oh, that's
so they never give up. They never give up. And that was really unfortunate because nobody built a better system even now to protect critical infrastructure, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But as to my work now, I'm an artist and I continue painting. I really enjoy this. Art gave me so much satisfaction. One of my paintings, actually, when we lived undercover, I painted from my memories when I was waiting for Victor coming at night, when he had this, shifts in the KGB at night, and there were always somebody watching in the window. This is communist mentality. Somebody always had the red window. And this is a painting is when I have hidden windows behind the birch trees. It's very, very symbolic.
Okay.
So I expressed a lot of my feelings and memories when we lived undercover, and I created this series on Russia and communism. But then when we went public, I started working on different series. And one of my series is Facial Expressions. We had a workshop on my 77 portraits where people from 8 countries looking at the same portrait, it's a graphic portrait, and say what they see in this portrait. It was amazing how people from different cultures look at the same portrait and they see totally different thing. One will say, oh, this guy's flirty, or this is too serious, or he is evil, or he's amazing. Tells us that how much we don't know about this, and we judge people very quickly by the way they look. So that's a very interesting project I'm still working on. And another, my passion is life stories. I produced over 200 TV shows, and especially Your Source TV. Every time I'm doing production with doctor or new technology, it is a personal story. Like, why did you become a doctor? Because I was at a family reunion and I saw my cousin, and I really figured out that he is sick. And I told it, nobody believed me, but then they've done, some tests, and it happened to be true. So this is how a person became a good doctor. Or another person, his mother had arthritis, and he came up with this typesetter where you just move fingers and you do not move, you don't touch the letters. So this personal stories made me go for more stories. And I also have this private club events where people tell in life stories, and I learn every time from this. And I always tell people, you think your life is tough, you just hear other people's stories. So that's my passion, and I really think that listening to other people is a gift. And I'm very grateful for this, and obviously very grateful for the opportunity to do this and for my amazing life with Victor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're totally right about hearing those stories, because that is what I do here in a sense. And I haven't done 250 like you've done, but I've done nearly 100 now. And they really are fascinating stories. And it's so great to meet someone and learn as much as you possibly can about them and ask the right questions and unlock those memories. It's really, really an enjoyable experience for me as well.
Yes, thank you. I think you're doing a great job, because this will stay, and some people can learn a lot from all your podcasts, and I listen to some of them already to get ready for
Well,
my.
thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I certainly hope someone can learn something from you as well after they hear this. So, Olga, where can people connect with you online now if they want to see some of your art or learn more about you?
Well, my website is olgaarts.com, and my artwork is also displayed at allegoryofnature.com. There's a store there. And obviously, I have my TV shows on YouTube, Your Source TV and Russia Today.
Okay, wonderful. We'll put some links in the show notes so that people can find those from here as well. Well, thank you so much, Olga. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad that we were able to connect, and just thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, this episode will be out soon, and it was wonderful talk with you. So you take care.
Thank you.
If you're interested in more of Spycraft 101, look for my page on Instagram at Spycraft 101. You can also find more great articles on my website, spycraft101.com. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll stick around because there's lots more to come.
Disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The stories and statements expressed herein are experiences and opinions. They may not reflect the views of the host or the production studio. It's okay if you disagree with our content. No piece of media is right for everyone. If you love Spycraft 101, please check us out online, on Instagram, on YouTube, and especially on Patreon. Thank you for listening.